Okay, picture this. Imagine your entire livelihood, your multi-million-dollar contract, and your whole public identity are completely 100% dependent on your physical body, right? Welcome to the incredibly high-stakes reality of a professional athlete. Today, in this explainer, we're diving deep into the multi-dimensional ecosystem of human health. And we're going to do it by looking at exactly what happens when that athlete's reality is suddenly shattered. We usually look at elite athletes like they're these unstoppable, physically perfect machines. We obsess over their speed, their power, their endurance. But I want you to think about this for a second. Can an athlete with absolute physical perfection actually lose a match solely because they're experiencing poor social or emotional health? We're going to challenge the really common assumption that sports are purely physical. And we'll do that by unpacking what happens when an athlete's hidden internal ecosystem just completely collapses. To really get this, we need to redefine health through what's called the principle of wholeness. This basically frames health not as a bunch of isolated little compartments, but as a highly integrated dynamic web. Think of it like a giant spider web, okay? The physical, mental, social, emotional, spiritual, and environmental dimensions, they're all connected strings. If you pull aggressively on just one of those strings, the entire structure vibrates. A change in just one single dimension causes an immediate, unavoidable ripple effect across all the others. So let's put this into practice. Imagine a star professional athlete right in the middle of a massive contract year. And suddenly, the absolute worst happens, a severe, season-ending ACL tear. The knee ligament simply gives out. Now, from a traditional, purely medical viewpoint, well, this is just a physical injury, right? The knee is broken. But when you view it through the lens of the health ecosystem, this isolated physical event is about to trigger a massive, multidimensional downward spiral. That downward spiral starts with immediate physical immobility and extreme pain, obviously. But that physical trauma, it instantly jumps over to the mental dimension. The athlete begins this severe cycle of overthinking, experiencing intense performance anxiety. They're wondering, will I ever play professionally again? Am I going to lose my starting spot to some rookie? And this mental stress doesn't just stay politely in their head. It quickly morphs into intense emotional frustration. That constant worry turns into wild mood swings, sudden anger, and just a really deep feeling of helplessness. Because they're completely overwhelmed by this frustration, their behavior radically changes. They stop showing up to team film sessions. They start ducking calls from their agent. When their family tries to help or the media starts asking questions, they just snap. So an injury that started in the knee has now completely severed the athlete's social health. They are entirely isolating themselves from their vital support system, right in the middle of a major professional crisis. And once the athlete is cut off from their sport, their friends, and their whole team infrastructure, the ripple effect hits the spiritual dimension. Now, in this context, spiritual health refers to your sense of identity, your values, and your life goals. Without the locker room and that sacred game day routine, the athlete loses their primary sense of identity. They literally wake up and think, well, if I'm not an athlete, who am I? Their fundamental life purpose just evaporates. Because they are so emotionally drained and spiritually lost, their ability to focus completely vanishes. They start missing vital rehab appointments, which actively harms their standing with the front office and directly threatens future endorsement deals. The physical breakdown has officially triggered a professional and vocational fallout. A single torn ligament has systematically dismantled the entire person. It's wild to think about. All right, moving on to section 2, the biological breakdown. Let's look at why the body fails under psychological stress. So, you may be wondering, how on earth does a bad mood or feeling lonely actually stop a physical knee from healing? Well, we have to look at the hard science of the mind-body connection, specifically the nervous system. Mental stress and anxiety trigger the sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight mode. Conversely, mental peace and strong social support activate the parasympathetic nervous system. That's your rest and digest mode. Going back to our isolated, anxious athlete, their constant worry leaves them perpetually stuck in fight or flight. This floods their body with massive amounts of adrenaline and the stress hormone cortisol. And here's a crazy fact for you. Chronic high cortisol can actually delay physical wound healing by up to 40%. The athlete's blood pressure spikes, digestion slows down, and their muscles remain incredibly tight, which actually increases the risk of further injury. But worst of all, this chemical state disrupts deep sleep, which is the exact time the body performs tissue repair. Their body literally cannot heal the knee because their mind is panicked. And it gets even worse when we look at the immune system. Science shows us that social isolation, loneliness, and constant friction with teammates actively increases systemic inflammation throughout the entire body. This chronic inflammation weakens the immune system, making our injured pro highly susceptible to catching colds, the flu, or even developing chronic fatigue. Essentially, their poor social health is creating a highly toxic physical environment. Section 3. The upward spiral. Let's see how we can reverse this downward trend through support. Now, let's totally flip the script. If we place that exact same athlete into a highly supportive, communicative rehabilitation environment, absolutely everything changes. It starts with social support. The coaching staff and veteran teammates make it a point to visit daily. They reassure the player that their contract is secure, that they're still a valued part of the team. This provides immediate emotional comfort. Anxiety just plummets. With that secure mindset, the player transitions to mental focus, concentrating intensely on their rehab playbook. And this, amazingly enough, leads to accelerated physical healing. Because the athlete feels socially supported and emotionally calm, the body naturally switches over to that parasympathetic rest and digest nervous system we talked about. Heart rate naturally lowers. Muscles finally relax, which reduces that dangerous tension around the injured knee. But most importantly, being in a relaxed state allows the body to release the vital growth hormones that are absolutely essential for rebuilding that torn ligament tissue. Social support is literally medicine. As the physical knee finally begins to heal up and gain strength, the upward spiral completes itself. The athlete naturally regains their confidence. They realign with their ultimate professional goals, and they rediscover their purpose. By fixing the social and emotional dimensions first, we allowed the physical dimension to heal, which then fully restored the spiritual dimension. It's a complete 180. Section 4. Mapping the ecosystem and predicting the interrelationships of these health dimensions. To really master this concept, whether you're managing a sports franchise or honestly just optimizing your own life, you have to be able to predict these chain reactions. For example, high mental stress from an upcoming championship often creates a secondary physical effect, manifesting as tension headaches or poor motor coordination. On the flip side, social conflicts like locker room drama directly hit the emotional dimension, causing sudden anger and low self-esteem. Conversely, implementing a positive physical trigger, like regular aerobic exercise, positively impacts the mental and emotional dimensions by releasing endorphins, which actively reduces anxiety and sharpens your focus. And these triggers also include vital, yet completely invisible factors. A spiritual loss, meaning a lack of purpose or undefined career goals, basically guarantees withdrawal and incredibly poor teamwork on the field. And hey, don't forget the environment. Something as simple as training in high air or noise pollution directly impacts the physical dimension. It causes respiratory issues, a lower VO2 max, and early physical exhaustion. Every single thread in the web matters. Which brings us to our ultimate takeaway from this explainer. There's a quote from the source material that sums this up perfectly for anyone in the world of high performance. Your job is not just to train muscles. You must build supportive environments, teach stress management, and instill values to create a truly healthy athlete. You simply cannot achieve peak positive health by solely focusing on the physical body. You have to actively manage and nurture the entire holistic web. So, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on. The next time you step onto the field, into the clinic, or even just look at your own personal routines, ask yourself, are you building a supportive, interconnected ecosystem, or are you just trying to train an isolated machine? Remember, if you pull one string, the whole web moves. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this changes how you view the true complexity of human health.